And welcome to another edition of Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 27-year uh, experience in comics, science fiction, fantasy, and horror as a writer, illustrator, editor, and media journalist. And this week's theme is the Comics Blame Game, and we'll be talking about various methods of, I guess you could say, approaches that different facets of our community that we call the comics industry, whether it's fans, creators, publishers, the comics media, um, partake in, and what that has done to our industry, both in a positive and negative aspects, and what we can do better in the future. But before we get into that, we need to go ahead and talk about our weekly mention, and that is that this is in accordance with the new COPPA regulations with YouTube. This episode of Quoth the Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature sometimes on the show is kid-friendly, the context of the episode is to address and educate older teens and adults to inform them of said content for them to research as consumers in service of their youth. In other words, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, and others. There is the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well, rated TV 16 and up. Now, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of people sending me questions, and so we're going to get into that just shortly. I'm going to try to be as not kid gloves, but I'm going to try to be polite about things for a multitude of reasons. One thing is I want to try to be a better podcaster and a better representative of our industry than maybe I have in the past, because I'm certainly not without fault myself on some of these things. But if I'm going to be critical of things going on, I need to, kind of step up my game too. So if I get a little ranty, go ahead and say something. If you're in the podcast, you say, "Hey, you're getting a little bit ranty," let me know. But we'll try to be polite and forthcoming with everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our questions this week. Our first question is from Sean M. And he says, "I know you have watched other people's podcasts in the past. What do you think of the things that are being said about the creators and publishers on some of these shows in light of recent events?" Well, in the past couple weeks, due to the situation with the coronavirus, there's been some, decisions made by publishers and creators alike that they're not popular decisions by any means, but a lot of times these decisions are made within a context that is, a situation that is ultimately beyond their control, and they're just trying to react in media rays as things are in motion constantly. And none of us are in our best form right now. I think everybody's just frustrated, and I think a lot of that frustration is elevated due to the fact that now everybody's at home and they're bored and they want something to do. So now, now's the time. Well, I was always annoyed with this creator, or I was always annoyed about this thing going on. Now I'm going to get on my Facebook, or I'm going to get on my Twitter account, or I'm going to get on my podcast, and I'm going to rant about it just because, well, I got time to do it now. And it's really created more toxicity in the industry and in our fandom and in our daily lives for everybody as a result. but it's basically just a heightened version of what has been a regular state of action that has been building increasingly, really ever since the advent of the internet as a whole, back in the early '90s with message boards on the Usenet boards or AOL message boards. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with the culture of online communication and what that's done. But what I think of a lot of my fellow podcasters doing what they're doing and turning every little Twitter battle into news, or turning did you see what so and so said to this fan, or did you see they're disrespecting us, and it's like, take some time and step back, because as someone who's been attacked over the years by fandom, and I mean, like literally hundreds of emails or hundreds of personal messages, death threats and stuff like that, and you don't see anything, you don't see anything until you snap, and it could be this a little something that normally wouldn't tick you off, but because you've dealt with it for weeks or months on end and you haven't said a word, and then you go off on someone that, and to the outside world, it seems like, well, that person didn't deserve that. And maybe they didn't, but you have to realize that person has put up with all these other pressures behind the scenes. And maybe it shouldn't have been directed at that individual who got it directed at them. It should be directed at everybody who's being an asshole to them. But unfortunately, that happens sometimes, and we have to step back and say, okay, they're human. They got out of line, but let it go. It's not worth making news out of it, because it's not news. It's human nature. But because we do make it news, and it's all over Bleeding Cool for clickbait, or it's all over Nerdology, or it's all over, Van Skyver's podcast or Sweetcast, or every little podcaster's got to talk about the same stuff and get their 2 cents in on it. It just exacerbates a situation that really doesn't need to be even presented as anything other than someone flew off the handle. It happens. Well, you're a professional, you shouldn't do that. Hey, you're a human being first, and yes, we try, but you don't know what all they've been going through and what they've withheld from responding to before they responded to what they did. So, and from whom and when and how often. So, I think people need to just cut that out in that respect. But they won't, unfortunately, because it's clickbait, and they think that's the way to drive up viewers and drive up hits on their sites. It's going to get them more thing, in that situation. Mark Andrew Smith, one of our regular guests and viewers of the show, says, one thing I saw this week was that Dan Fraga, who's a comics artist, turned to Comicsgate on Facebook, and Sienkiewicz, I guess it's Bill Sienkiewicz, chimed in. When you say turn to Comicsgate, do you mean he became a member of Comicsgate, or he turned and criticized Comicsgate, and then Sienkiewicz chimed in for or against? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, exactly. It's the same as usual. Yes, it is. It is the same as usual. And then good behavior isn't rewarded. Usually someone has to flip out, and that's rewarded. Yeah. It's not even necessarily rewarded. They flip out and they get punished for it a lot of times, more than rewarded, because they get, because Rich Johnston is sitting there following every Twitter feed out there, so, whatever, Mark clarifies that Dan Fraga became a member of Comicsgate. Well, Comicsgate, this group, that group, this click, that click. Uh, it's high school. It's junior high school stuff. You know, um, it's basically saying, "Hey, everybody else's stuff stinks except mine. We're the cool kids. If you're not with us, you're not cool." Type stuff. And it's like listening to Van Sciver talk about these so-called SJWs that are ruining comics. It wasn't like that when I was there. Well, I hate to tell you, almost all your members are the guys who drove me away from Marvel and DC in the 90s and early 2000s. Lamo 40s SJWs, so-called SJWs, came into the market. So you're just as guilty. And I don't want to hear your bullshit. Pardon my language, but to me, that's what it is. I'm not saying that you don't have a right to be in the business. I'm not saying you haven't got a right to try and market your product as well as everyone else. But if you got to tear down other people to make your own work or yourself look better, well, then maybe it's because your work isn't that good either. Just my opinion on that. But, but anyhow, let's go on to our next question. Tom B says, you mentioned indieplanet.com on the show recently, but they are shut down by the state they are based in for coronavirus too, so I can't get books there. Yes, Florida has the shut-in rule, and Barry Gregory, who runs indieplanet.com, has talked about this, and he's explained that if you make your orders as a publisher or you make your orders on the site as a consumer, they are keeping records, and things are in the Kiwi for the printer, and they're going to, as soon as they're able to go back to work, they'll fulfill all orders as quickly as possible. It's the best they can do right now, and to make that statement is kind of silly. I mean, I don't care if it's Indie Planet, Amazon, Lulu.com, whatever. Everybody's in the same boat with this problem with not being able to distribute their goods right now due to the events of coronavirus, and there's no point in criticizing anybody for that. It's just, unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast right now. And all we can do is hope for that situation to come to a close and get back to normalcy as soon as possible. And in the meantime, we've got back issues to reread or back issues we haven't read. There's stuff in our collections we don't have that we can contact retailers who are able to do curbside service or mail order service right now, and try to order those books and get those sent to us to help benefit the retailers. So, I don't really, I don't see any sense in being negative in that respect, Tom. I know you didn't mean to be disrespectful or negative in your statement. I know you, and I know that's not what you were intending, but I just want to clarify in case someone is watching the show and gets that vibe from that statement. It's just that, unfortunately, the way things are being done right now and the way people are acting in the industry and in social media right now, I don't know. Maybe it's just the stress levels of what's going on. They're just lashing out. I don't know. But they'll do the best they can as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. Our next question is from Anonymous. And they ask, if you were in charge of Diamond, how would you approach this recent situation with the virus shutdown? Pretty much the way they handled it. You got to remember that before Diamond did their official shutdown, basically every major publisher, not named Marvel or DC, was already putting pencils down, already telling you that they were going to either delay shipments of new books or cancel books for an indeterminate period of time. And while Diamond may have a certain set number of products in their warehouses, and maybe could have gone an extra 2 or 3 weeks, the New Jersey state was clamping down on them for their regulations and bylaws for the coronavirus as well. So there really wasn't anything that Diamond did that was inappropriate, much to the chagrin of the fans, much to the chagrin of the retailers. They handled this about as well as possible given the circumstances. It doesn't mean it comes out to a result that we're happy with, but they're not happy with it either. And all it's doing is, as our ecosystem of our industry is in deadlock, it's hurting them as much as it's hurting the retailers, because if books aren't going to the retailers, there's no money getting sent back to Diamond to pay for their bills. And, everybody's talking about how Diamond may or may not go into bankruptcy and other stuff like that. People need to realize that there's been talks about Diamond being shut down, Diamond being sold off, other things. This is not new. This is 2 or 3, 4 years now that they've been talking about this behind the scenes. And, when you see DC talking about, well, they're looking for other avenues, there are already other avenues in place. It's been already mentioned that Ingram periodicals and books and Simon & Schuster and Random House and other places, those channels are already there and have been there for years. They've been subcontractors with Diamond fulfilling them. All that's going to happen, if that happens to the extent of what they're talking about, is they're just going to shift from Diamond to those parties directly, either temporarily or permanently, depending on the circumstances of what happens with Diamond. And, that's still up in the air. We'll have to wait and see. And if that does change, how that will affect retailers, well, we'll talk about that when that time comes, because it's not good to speculate and try and, bring possible gloom and doom on the future of comics when people don't really know. I don't know all of the facts. I don't pretend to, but I'm doing the best I can to talk with people I know who work at these companies, not just Diamond, but at Ingram, at Random House, because I have contacts with those groups. I'm trying to learn what they know and what they can share. And responsibly, as a journalist, I can't just, do what Rich Johnston does or do what some of these other guys do and say, well, this is what's happening, or just do a press release response. I'd like to dig a little bit deeper if I can, and get a little more, I guess you'd say, inside baseball or inside knowledge for the audience. They understand a little bit more of what's going on before I talk about that. Our next question is from Chris A. in Atlanta, Georgia, who asks, do you think this pandemic is going to shut down a lot of comics retailers and publishers? Why or why not? Well, it's going to adversely affect a lot of people, yes. Shutdowns and a lot is, what's a lot? And also, it could shut down many small press publishers, but is that going to be noticed by the larger community? Probably not. But if it adversely affected and shut down a major publisher like an IDW or a Boom or an Oni, Lion Forge, or it adversely affected one of the mid-tier as a result, then it would matter. But if it takes out John Smith publications, no one's going to care. And so if a lot of the small press in the back of the book gets adversely affected, I don't think the retailers are going to care, and I don't think the fans are going to care necessarily, at least in the larger whole of the community. Obviously there's going to be some customers who are supportive of those things who are going to be ticked off about it. And it's the same thing with customers who are going to lose their stores. They're going to be ticked off about that. But at the same time, and we'll get into that a little bit later with the blame game, a lot of this could have been avoided in other means, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our next question. Multiple parties ask, what do you think is the next move for the comics industry? If Diamond shuts down permanently, what will happen? Well, as I've already said, there are contingencies with Ingram and Simon & Schuster and probably Random House as well, and there will be other venues as well for the so-called mainstream. The next move for independents, there's a lot of different possibilities. Obviously, digital is something that everybody's ranting and raving about. When are we going to move there permanently, or what's going on with that? Print on demand, crowdfunding methodologies and techniques. The retailers that, if Diamond shuts down, what are they going to do? Well, it depends on them. On an individual basis, are they going to understand what has to be done as a retailer? You're used to doing things through this one distributor, and that's all fine and well. That was what you were brainwashed to do, or what you're used to doing. But that's not normal retailing. Normal retailers use more than one distribution channel. And if that means you have to go and get some of your books through Ingram and some through Simon & Schuster, and then for the indies, maybe we form a new coalition, a new distributor that handles just the indies, whatever. Brick and mortar stores are going to have to adapt to that if that happens, and they don't want to. That's why they're having the hissy fit that they are on the internet right now. It's because they don't want to deal with that situation. And you may not want to, and I'm not going to say it's inevitable, but it is inevitable in a way. Even if it doesn't happen because of this specific set of circumstances, this has been the direction that our industry has been gravitating towards for the past 2 decades. And it's going to, you're going to have to make that choice, retailers, at some point. So we'll talk more about that when we get to the blame game. Next question is from Anonymous. And they ask, if you were going to open a distributorship for comics today, how would you approach things and why? Oh, wow. I wish Milton Greep were available. For those of you who don't know who Milton is, he's the guy who runs ICV2.com, and he was the head of Capital City Distribution back in the 80s and 90s before the Diamond Monopoly. Comics distribution is something that I think, if we're going to open a new distributorship, has to be open to something beyond just brick and mortar specialty stores. When we look at how Diamond is operated and how retailers have used Diamond over the years, Diamond carries less than 10% of all comics produced in North America right now. And of that, most comic retailers are only ordering about 35%, 35 to 45% of the books that are in the catalog, and only 20% of the books in the catalog to what we would consider to be a profitable margin of orders and sales, which means they're probably representing about 2% of all comics. So if you're going to open a distributorship, you have to be able to open the medium to more than just the specialty stores. And that's part of how I would approach things. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have brick and mortar specialty stores be a quote unquote priority of sorts, but I have to look at it as if a retailer doesn't want to order, um, when I say a retailer, I should say the retailers as a whole, however many retailer accounts, comic specialty store accounts I have as a whole, don't want to meet the measurable criterion of sales margin for a book, then my job as a distributor is to go seek out other um, accounts that will support that, so that whoever is being distributed by my company is going to find an audience that is supportive of them and keep them in business. Um, Diamond doesn't do that at all, and I think that's one of the biggest failures of Diamond, and I think that's one of the biggest failures of the retail community when they allowed Capital and the other distributors to go under and allowed for the Diamond monopoly. And they say, well, we didn't. We went to Department of Justice and stuff. It doesn't matter. Um, Capital had it set up to support a lot of stuff that Diamond didn't carry, and you turned your noses up and your backs to that content. And if you hadn't, we might not be where we're at right now. But we'll talk a little bit more extensively on that in the future of this episode. See if we got any more questions. Yes, we do. Roger from Illinois asks, do you think that creators are right to attack fans online? Well, again, we talked about that a little bit earlier in the podcast about creators being attacked themselves online and then they lash out. It would be in the best interests of people in our communities to understand that it's okay not to like someone's work. It's even okay not to like a person. But do you really need to waste your energies and time trying to make them miserable? And then all of a sudden they get back, well, look what they did to me. It's like poking the bear. Why do you poke a bear? You know, if you poke them enough, they're going to swat at you and you're going to get your head torn off. Why would you do that? There's that. Mark Anderson says, John Smith is my uncle. How dare you? Well, which John Smith is that? Because I know about 20 of them. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, I missed that post a little bit earlier there, Mark. But yeah, that's the situation with it. I mean, is it right or fair for a creator to attack a fan? I think, in my own experience, because people say, I was always attacking fans when I was at Comic Book Resources. They often didn't realize that I wasn't attacking a fan. I was criticizing what they were saying, and there's a difference. It would be like they would say something that was a foolish leading question that was bound to lead into an argument. I'll give you an example. Someone posts on a board about who's your favorite Batman artist, was what the guy meant to ask. He says, Jim Lee's my favorite Batman artist ever. Isn't he the best? Or he says, isn't Jim Lee the best Batman artist ever? Well, that's a leading question that implies that everybody who answers that question should agree with you. The way you say it is, Jim Lee's my favorite Batman artist ever. Who's yours? And now we can all have a civil conversation. And whether you agree with or respect someone's opinion of who their favorite creator on a book is or not, they're entitled to that opinion. So you just leave it alone. But when you say, isn't that person the best? You're saying, you should be agreeing with my opinion. And no, you not necessarily. And that's what I was trying to explain on Comic Book Resources. And nobody says, oh, no, you were attacking it. No, I wasn't. But because I was a disliked person on the board, I got 30 people jumping my ass, and the moderator comes and talks to me because I corrected someone and on the way they expressed a statement so that they wouldn't get in a fight. That's the kind of nonsense that happens on our internet society. So, and yeah, when you get that sort of a thing on someone's Twitter account where they try to twist someone's words, or they attack someone, a creator, and say, well, you don't deserve to be working on such and such a book because you suck, or this, that, or the other. And you hear that enough, yeah, they're going to lash out. And, whether it's unprofessional, whether it's appropriate or not, again, you're only human, and, it's going to happen from time to time. It's just not something that needs to be made into a 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, noon, 6 o'clock in the evening news the next day, and 11 o'clock news the next day, in a cycle over and over and over for 2 or 3 weeks, the way every podcaster and so-called comics news site tends to do. Other questions? That's the end of our questions for this evening. So if you have other questions about this podcast or just topics in general, email them to quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com, subject QTR questions, and please indicate whether you want your name and locale read on air. Now, before we get into our reviews for the week, we'll talk about this situation of the Comics Blame game. Hold on a second. Let me open up another window here real quick. Trying to find it here. Yes, here it is. Okay. I'm going to open a different window real quick. Just share a screen with you guys. And that is our random name picker. And that's how we're kind of playing the game. On it is the fans, the retailers, the creators, the publishers, and the comics media. And we'll just randomly pick which one we're going to talk about first, okay? We have a winner, the fans. So let's talk about the fans first. Okay. Fandom tends to do a lot of crazy things. There is a sense of, well, we've used the word before, entitlement, but there's a sense that they have this, because they buy a book or don't buy a book, if they don't like something, they have the right to express their opinion on it. Well, yes, you do have a right to express your opinion on things you don't like. But once you've expressed it, you don't need to come back to it again and again and again. And once you've expressed it to a person, whether it be a creator or a publisher, you've said your piece. Just because it doesn't result in the way you think it should, doesn't mean that you get to go off on a rant and say, well, they're, jerks because they didn't do it my way. Yes, I get frustrated too. and I say it all the time, that, Marvel and DC don't do what I want from them, so I don't buy their books. Um, but that's the point. I also generally don't come on here and say, well, look at this junk over here that they're making. Look at this, what they're talking about over here. Look at this, look at this, look at this. Usually what I do is I criticize the rest of you for doing that because negative. More of us need to do positive things. And whether that's positive reviews of books, whether that's interviewing creators whose work we actually like and promote that content. When you're in a store and you hear somebody ranting off about Gay Iceman or Nazi Cap or Snowflake and whatever the character, Safe Space or whatever, you need to shut that down and say, look, I get it. You don't like that stuff. That's fine. But look at all the other stuff in the room. Let's find something cool that you like to talk about and get you happy about comics instead of complaining about what's there that you don't like. Because if enough of us don't like it, it's going to go away. We don't need to talk about it and bring attention to it. We can go talk about the cool stuff that we all like or enough of us like, and that'll be the news, hopefully, and then that'll be, beneficial for everybody because it'll be beneficial for the creators who created that book that you do like. It'll be beneficial for the retailers who are hopefully ordering and selling that book that you like, and, so on and so forth, up along the chain, so, that's, we need to change the dynamic there as a fan community in that respect. And you can't sit there and go, well, they didn't respect me because I criticized them on a book. What did you say? Well, I said their work sucked. Well, no, don't say their work sucks. Say, well, I don't care for what you did on this book because of reasons X, Y, and Z. And maybe they'll listen to you. But if you just say, well, your work sucks and you don't belong in the business, why the heck should anyone listen to you saying that to them? That's not that, that's just white noise in the background. And, put on white noise in your ears loud enough and tell me it doesn't aggravate you or what. So, that's not, that's something that the fans need to learn. And they have to change this notion that, they're the onus or they're the focal point of the industry. They're, none of us should be sitting here saying we're the focal point per se. It is a shared ecosystem, and each part has an equal place in it. But because of the nature of what we've been doing, criticizing each other and pointing fingers at one another, everybody's saying, well, I'm the focal point. And that, and I'll get into that for how it applies to retailers and creators and publishers as well. But with fans, their attitude is, well, I'm the guy buying all the books, or I'm the gal buying all the books. You should pander to me. Well, there's a lot of you. I can't, no one can pander to everyone individually. But we can try to find and create as broad a depth and range of books for everyone that we can enjoy as much as possible for as many different people as possible. And we shouldn't be saying, well, I don't like it, well, somebody else might. So let that person enjoy the book and you go find something else to enjoy. Don't take it, don't crap on something that's somebody else's enjoyment. And I try not to do that. Even when you guys watch my show, you watch my reviews. Even when I give a less than stellar review, I see that's my opinion from me. you might, hopefully if you try this book, maybe you'll like it better. But, that's how it felt for me. And I don't ever say that the book didn't deserve to exist. I don't ever say that the creators need to be fired or anything like that. It's just, if something isn't what I wanted from it, that's the way it is. And, but I'll still tell you about it if I think it's worth telling you about. Because even if I don't like something, hopefully if you try it, maybe you will. But I always try to bring on stuff I do like, so it's even more positive nature of discussion. So, that's what I have to say about the fans. And instead of blaming everyone else, look in the mirror and say, hey, what am I doing that's contributing to this negativity, this toxicity, and correct that, because I can't correct it for you. No one else can correct it for you. You have to acknowledge it and correct it yourselves. Our next group is the comics media. Well, I think we've already discussed a little bit what's wrong with the comics media and how they're at fault on certain things. Whether you're doing it to turn something that isn't news into news to generate buzz for your website or buzz for your YouTube channel, to generate revenues, whether that's through advertising or through monetization of your podcast or your site. All that's doing is, while it might benefit you in the short term, you're hurting everyone else in the process, in my opinion. And that's not what comics journalism was supposed to be. It's not what journalism is supposed to be. And this is a greater, this is a microcosm of the greater whole in our media, entertainment, news entertainment society today. Everything from TMZ to Entertainment Tonight to Yahoo News to everything about these type of channels is to try and generate an immediate response from an audience to react instead of I'm trying to think of the word. Take the information and disseminate it correctly, I guess you could say. They keep hitting you with so much information so quickly that we don't have time to disseminate the information and process it so that we can give a proper reaction to it. It's an example is this new Warriors thing with Snowflake and Safe Space and Trailblazer and these other characters. A minute they were talking, it's SJW garbage, blah 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 blah. Yes, the characters were the designs were weak. The characters are a little bit weak, but take you step back and you stop complaining about it. The Safe Space character, who is a character who can create force fields but can't protect themselves, only others from harm with their force fields. That's an interesting limitation on that superpower. What are they going to do with that? How does that work? How does that affect that person's personality, that character's personality? There's a potentially interesting character there, but because you don't like the name of it, because they used a name that they're trying to use a negative connotation and spin positivity on it, you're going to mock it. Come on, that's kind of silly. People are talking about the guy with the internet gas, who's basically a living connection 24/7 to the internet. I don't know how that's going to be executed. Maybe what it is micro or nanotechnology that's going to be in his body, and it was inhaled by in a gaseous substance or something, and that's why they said internet gas. But what it really is nanotechnology that's going to be living inside him. I don't know, but if that, there's a potential to make that interesting, but you've already basically said, I don't give a damn what it is. I don't like the name. I don't like the character concept. I don't like the way the character looks. It's shit. And that's the media doing it as much as the reaction of the fans responding to the media release. And then here comes the creator in response to that. Hey, you haven't even looked at this stuff yet. What are you judging it for? Wait until it comes out before you judge it, and it all gets nasty. When you're doing comics journalism properly, you take the press release and then you qualify these things and say, hey, before you judge what you're looking at, take these thoughts into consideration as well, because it may not be what you think it is. And you try to be balanced as a journalist. And unfortunately, a lot of times, because that takes time to do correctly, because that is counterintuitive to the nature of the pace of how we produce news in our entertainment culture, news as entertainment, as opposed to news being informative. We've lost that that element. A lot of people who are trying to be comics journalists don't have a real journalistic background, don't know that that's what you're supposed to do. They're just doing what they're told, and trying to be, Johnny on the spot or Julie on the spot, as it were. And we need to change that. We need to. We may not be able to change the major platforms like Bleeding Cool or CBR, Newsarama, or some of these other ones that are out there. But those of you who want to do podcasting and do your opinion columns and do your blogs and stuff, take the time to learn how to do this, because it will not only make your presentation better in the long run, it will make people sit back and think before they react. And that'll be healthier for everyone involved. Our next group is our retailers. Now, Mark, I don't know if you're still here with us. Mark recently posted on his Facebook page about how he didn't really care if the retailers went away because they were not particularly supportive of his books when he was using the Diamond system, which is truth. Several retailers, Brian Hibbs, William Binderup or Cinderup or something like that, a couple of others commented to the effect of, well, if you had marketed your books better, they would have sold, and because we ordered them, and blah 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 blah. That shit stops, retailers. The other thing that stops is this crap I keep saying about how you take all the risks and how you're on the front lines and how we don't treat you as equal partners. Because here's the bottom line. The comics retail community, that faction, that group of our ecosystem, your job is to be the ambassadors and the marketers and the sales force for everybody without prejudice. None of you work without prejudice, number one. And number two, if Mark or Christian Baranek or myself or Ron Randall or Todd Azago and Craig Rousseau with Perhapanauts or Carl Kiesel and Tom Grummett with Section Zero or any of these books, whether we went through Diamond at one time or not, or we've never gone through Diamond with our books, we sell better on our own than with all of you, whether it's 1,500 real retailers, as Dennis O. Barger claimed on his Facebook page this week, or it's the 2,600 plus that was announced as the number of Diamond accounts through accidental data release that was mentioned on Bleeding Cool a few months ago. I don't care how many retailers there are among you. If we're selling more copies this way than you are collectively as a group, you have failed your part of the responsibility. And therefore, you don't get to say, we didn't do ours, because our job is to produce and distribute the goods. That doesn't mean we're not there to try and help you market our products as well. We have a responsibility to that. No one's denying that. And yes, you have the unenviable task of trying to market every product you order to a profitable margin of sales. And that's very difficult when you've got 700 to 800 books a month through Diamond. However, if you're only ordering 350 out of those 800, and you're only marketing the top 100 books ordered out of those 800, you're only marketing 20% of everybody. Is 20% a passing grade, gentlemen, ladies? I don't think it is. I think that, and I think that's why your stores have fallen under hard times, and you have found yourselves stuck with this monopolization because you have chained yourselves to this broken structure that is the diamond distribution system, not the direct market system. Everybody's saying it's the direct market. It's direct market. It's the diamond market that's broken. We can have a direct market. We can rebuild regional distribution again. And you guys can get all those comics that are at indieplanet.com or lulu.com or at amazon.com, or the stuff that we're marketing on print on demand elsewhere, or we're marketing strictly digital, whether that's at Webtoons or Comixology, and there's no print format for you to sell, or it's stuff that we're crowdfunding, because the reason we're doing digital, the reason we're doing print on demand, the reason we're doing crowdfunding is because Diamond bottlenecked us and left us behind. You're getting complained, don't leave us behind. We were left behind. You don't seem to care that we were left behind. Think about it. You don't get to have that I hate to say it, but that hypocrisy. That's what it is. It's hypocrisy. And that needs to be changed. That needs to be corrected. If you guys want to save your stores, it's not that we necessarily want to. Yeah, Mark is here. Sorry about that, Mark. Do you want to add, Mark? Do you want to? You can pop in and show up on screen if you want, or you can post in the chat. Since I mentioned this was about, partly brought about by your statements on your Facebook page and the reaction thereof, you're not the only person who's had this. I've seen about 20 or 30 creators, and it's not just creators who once were at Diamond and going through comic book shops, but people who are former creators that you will hear and see fans and retailers going, oh, I wish that these people were still at Marvel or DC. And they're saying, hey, I'm still here. I'm just not there at Marvel and DC. I've got product over here. Why don't you support this? I didn't die. And that's kind of the thing. We are there. And, the creators, we want to be part. We want to work with you, but you have to make a choice to work with us. And for the past 20 years, even before the diamond monopolization, but immediately post diamond monopolization, when Milton Greep was trying to keep capital alive, when we had United Comics, when we had Penguin Palace out in California, when we had Kevin Clady's distribution group, retailers just turned their noses up and said, no, you guys don't have Marvel and DC. That's all we need. And that's Diamond, so we don't need you guys. Well, now that Marvel and DC are screwing up everything according to everybody, they're not doing good books, and you're losing customers left and right. And you're asking Marvel and DC to save you. Well, how can they possibly be saving you when they're the ones that are, according to your own customers, going to do, that's that. Mark Andrew Smith says that's exactly it. If there was support, we would be there and bringing people with us. Exactly. It's not that we want the brick and mortar stores, retailers to go out of business. We do not want you to go out of business. But, you have to realize that you're part of, if you're going to call yourselves partners, that you got to hold up your end of the partnership. And I'm not saying that's easy. It's very difficult. When you've got, literally 800 at Diamond and over 4,000 to 5,000 outside of the Diamond market of content to pick from and market, that can be oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, what you retailers do is, if I market X-Men, I'm going to get X-Men, X-Factor, X-Force, Excalibur, Wolverine, Gambit, Cable, whomever, whatever. But if I order Mark's book, Gladstone School for World Conquerors, or Sullivan Sluggers, or I order Christian Baranek and Jerry Ordway's Semi-Auto Magic, or I only order Louis Brightraven's Adventures of Space of the Alien, that's only one book. And if I turn my customers onto those individual titles, no matter how many copies I sell of those books, if I lose my sales on those X books, it's not going to make up for the loss. So I won't order those books in my store because I don't want that to happen. I want to have the most cross-pollination as possible. That's a short-term, short-sighted business practice. Okay? And so, as Mark is saying, we're two different ecosystems and species right now. Yes, we're starting to splinter, and we have been splintering in that respect, because we have, like I said, we're moving towards digital. We've moved towards print on demand. We've moved towards the online crowdfunding and so on, mostly because we weren't welcome in the direct market anymore. Mark says, but it is going towards creator to buyer directly. Yes and no. Stop it, cat. It's going to brands and not just creators. That's what Comicsgate is. It's a brand. If you're part of that click group, even if your book isn't as good as some of the others, you're part of that brand. And we're going to get you to buy that brand. And then when they splinter off and hate each other and start backstabbing each other, which has happened, you've all watched it on the podcasts with these people. They've attacked Bigfoot Bill guy. What's his name? I can't even remember. The guy who created Earthworm Jim. They've attacked him because he left, or because of different ideologies, or there's your boy Zach is having a 6-man conversation with Ethan and John Malin and Chuck Dixon and a few other guys, and all of a sudden Zach says, yeah, that guy Clint Stucker at Smoothcast, he just doesn't get it. And Clint's on his podcast going, what the hell is that about? I never said anything bad about him. I've been promoting him. You know, what is this? Well, I'm trying to be the nice guy. This is what happens. We, everybody wants to be alpha dog, and the thing is, nobody needs to be alpha or beta or zeta. There's enough room if we all share resources and market one another's books that everybody can earn a living, and nobody needs to be better than anybody else. And in direction of Amazon. Not necessarily just Amazon. I mean, again, we have indieplanet.com, we have lulu.com, we have other channels to use. And we even have publisher channels that are direct publishers. You can buy directly from a publisher that isn't Amazon. Image has a site for that, store site. Dark Horse has store sites for that. We've had, it's there. Mark says, they're dumping more money onto the same companies that have piles of money. So if they tried to have some well-known books also by independent creators, that would have some other legs on the table. Absolutely. But like I said, they, not just your books or my books or Christian Baranek's books, they do this. There's a reason why Cullen Bunn has 20 books on the market, but only his Marvel books sell of any reasonable number, and the other ones sell like a third to a fifth of that. And yet there's supposedly this huge market for Cullen Bunn. Well, if there's such a huge market, he doesn't need to be at Marvel or DC, does he? You should be able to sell his independent books at Boom and IDW and Aftershock and Oni and Dark Horse, right? But they don't, because the reality is, even though Cullen Bunn is a brand, as a creator brand, they want to utilize multiple brands as a selling point, because that'll be better. But it all gets bottlenecked and throttled, absolutely. And that's if we're going to do distribution, and I didn't add distribution on the list for the Blame Game, because we would have better distribution if the retailers and the publishers utilized it. They just don't seem to want to, unfortunately. But we can talk about that in a little bit. But that's the situation with retailers. And it does frustrate me because the retailers seem to have this attitude of, well, without us, you wouldn't be here. No, it's the other way around. You wouldn't have a business to run and operate if we creators and publishers weren't producing a product for you to sell. And we can sell direct to readers. And we are starting, and we're going that direction. And again, it's not that we don't want you as part of the market. It's not that we want you to close up, but I would much rather not have to, and I think Mark can say the same, we'd much rather not have to go on campaigns on the internet and market our books and give readers all these extra goodies just so they'll buy our content, which is what happens when you go on Indiegogo or Kickstarter or Patreon or these other formats. We'd rather work with you and have, 1,500 of you or 2,000 of you, or however many of you doing it, carrying 6 copies each month and committing to those 6 copies each month and marketing those 6. And if you're telling me, well, I can't seem to sell 6 copies in my store, then I want to have that conversation with you. I want to know how many people you have as customers. I want to know what your customers are saying about the product. I want to know what it is that is selling for you and why. Because I can almost guarantee you, with all these people complaining about everything that Marvel and DC does wrong, there should be no problem with you shifting your focus off of Marvel and DC books onto our books and other people's books that are standalone and might even expand once we got standalone stabilized and had guaranteed sales. Maybe we could expand and make a bunch of books for you. But we have to start at the ground floor. We can't just here's 10 books all at the same time. We got to build an audience. Mignola started with Hellboy, and then he expanded to BPRD. And then he did an Abe Sapien miniseries, and then he did Witchfinder, and then he did, it took years and years and years to build that. It can't happen overnight. Okay. So, if you're willing to support that, and let's face it, Mignola and his line has gotten really expansive, and a lot of people can't afford to build all that. But, and there's a lot of creators who are doing, like Jeff Lemire has his Black Hammer verse at Dark Horse now, which is a bunch of titles, and he's got his other content. It gets to a point where fans can't even afford it all. So it almost would be better in some respects for your customers to market standalone books, because then they feel like they get a diverse range of creators to enjoy without feeling guilty about not getting everything that person's doing, if they did like that creator, or not feel, I guess you could say, annoyed with the fact that there's too many books by that person. Because I know I do. I've said that before. I get annoyed with a lot of creators who have too many books out. I think a lot of fans do. They just don't say it. So, there are things to do. And I think the retailers, need to stop panicking about Diamond closing or what Marvel and DC are going to do, and start thinking about properly communicating with the rest of us and rebuilding those channels for everybody. And I think that's the responsibility right now for retailers. And they, whether it's because they're just, afraid, because I think they are afraid to do that. And, I can't say I don't understand that fear, but it's there and it has to be dealt with, and it's not that hard. We can find ways to work with you, but you got to be willing to work with us. So, okay. Let's go to the next one. All right, we got the publishers. Publishers, the biggest problem I think we've got with publishers right now is that everybody's publishing everybody at the same time. And what I mean by that is, if you open a previews catalog and you start writing down the number of books by a given writer or a given artist, and it doesn't matter who the creator is. I'm not dissing any specific creator, okay? But there's a lot of creators who are putting out many different books at the same time. And what is that doing? Well, that's creating a brand of sorts, but it's also making it so that everything looks pretty much the same to the casual consumer and to the fan as well. And when we get tired of a certain homogenized style or homogenized appearance or something that looks like it's all the same, we lose interest in that. And so, if you guys want to build your brands, you've got to start making it so that you're not hiring your competitors' employees and go look for someone else to hire and make them your key people for a while. And you need to hire people that aren't necessarily already gainfully employed in other markets. And what I mean by that is, if someone's already writing for 2 or 3 shows and has a novel out and this, they don't need to be writing for Marvel. They might be popular right now and everything, but there's other people who are just as qualified who don't have work, who would be more appreciative, and it'd be better for you than just having one more thing for their customers, their fans, to try and have to follow. Because like I said, when we get so much stuff out there, we kind of get annoyed with the creators and say, you're putting up too much stuff. I'm just going to back off and either not order that product, or even if we get, like me, I can get so annoyed I just don't buy any of their stuff. So, and I think a lot of fans are the same way. They just don't openly admit that. I do. I think that needs to change. The other thing is, we need to stop being redundant in what we produce. We don't need 10 X books and 10 Bat books. Well, that's what the fans want. No, it's not. We never asked for 10X books back in the 80s. We were happy with X-Men and New Mutants. We didn't even ask for X Factor. The reason we got X Factor was because Bob Layton and a few other people wanted to get a piece of pie of Chris Claremont's pie. And they figured, well, we'll take the old X-Men because the old X-Men, nobody wanted them. They went out of business, and he's not using them anyway. They're over, half of them are in the New Defenders, and we'll do something with it. And all that really did was screw up characters, screw up continuity. And Claremont warned you against this. And everybody thought, well, it's because Claremont's being protective of his characters and protective of his turf. Well, he was. I'm not going to say he wasn't, and he's not going to say he wasn't being protective of his turf. Of course he was. But he was also right in that it was going to inevitably create a problem where you alienated your audience from having too much content that was the same thing. And that's the same thing with a lot of Marvel content, a lot of DC content. And you're saying, well, it's because of SJWism, or it's because I don't like that writer, or I don't like this writer. No, it's because you're tired of seeing the same character over and over, and it doesn't matter who's doing the book. You're going to feel that way. So don't blame the creators, blame the system, and tell them to change the system. In that respect, people. I didn't leave Marvel and DC in the 90s because there were black writers writing books, or there were women writers and artists doing the books. I left because there was too many books, too many bad crossover event storylines, too many people that I did like that were getting forced out and replaced with creators I didn't necessarily care for. That doesn't mean I didn't give them a try. I gave them a chance, but they didn't entertain me, and I moved on. But I also didn't spend my time in the 90s going, oh, gee, I hate Scott Lobdell. Scott Lobdell doesn't deserve to write anything. I might say he can't write his way out of a wet paper bag with a crayon, but I say that in jest and to be humorous about his work and what I think of his work, not in the sense that, no, I hate the guy's guts and I don't think he deserves to have a job. I'm not going to buy his product, but that's my choice. I don't need to trash him for not buying the product or not supporting his product. I just, it's because somebody out there does like his stuff. So, okay, that's the way it is. I'll go find something else to read. As long as there's something else out there for me. So, there's that. I wish that more publishers would stop trying to incense the audience and use the comics media the way they do to try to generate false interest in a book. We'll use the New Warriors as an example. The reason the New Warriors isn't that good of a book isn't because the character's name Safe Space and Snowflake and whatever the one with the internet interface or whatever his name is. That's not the problem. The problem is we've seen this trope from Marvel too many times. It started with the New Mutants, and then it was the Fallen Angels, and then it was Power Pack, and then it was Young Avengers, and then it's the New Champions, and and it's the original New Warriors, the Young Allies. We've seen the teenage superheroes being heroes that are mentored by the previous generation so many times that it's like, been there, done that. Show me something. If you're going to do that, that's fine, but show me something really new that makes me go, oh, this is different. And this isn't different. This is just, the same kind of thing that you've already done that didn't work before. It did. If it did, Runaways would be selling better. If it did, Champions would have sold better by Jim Zub and Mark Waid and whoever was drawing it. If it, Young Avengers would have done better. Avengers Academy would have done better than they did. And again, it's not that any of those characters or books were necessarily bad. It was just that, again, it's like having all the artists that draw similarly. It's homogenized, been there, done that, and I don't care. And that's a shame, but that is what happens to the audience. Mark Andrew Smith says that's true. The books kept going and had bad filler for those mainstream books, so it's easy to get bored of the characters because it's not all 100% quality. Well, yes and no. I mean, quality is subjective. I mean, I admit I've seen a lot of Marvel books I didn't buy that I would borrow in trades, and I'll go, yeah, that wasn't too bad. It wasn't enough to make me want to buy it and own it in my collection, but I can't sit there and say it wasn't quality either. I can say, yeah, I can see where that book could have an audience if I market it correctly. If I was a retailer, I can see where it could be potential, but it's going to get lost amidst all of the ones that are the same type of book. And I think that's kind of where retailers misjudged your book, Gladstone's, because they were like, well, your book is about a bunch of nobody characters that are the sons and daughters of supervillains of the school. That's the same sort of thing as this stuff over here, and that stuff's not selling for me, so why should your book sell? Because your book was different, and it wasn't tied to all these other titles in this big mass universe. It's standalone. So if people are saying, well, I kind of liked that when it was this way, but there's too much of it in that view, and I don't want to have to be following all of that. As a retailer, you go, well, if you like that type of thing, but you want it standalone, here's Gladstone for World Conquerors. Here's Egos by Stuart Moore and Gus Storms. Here's Danger Club from Image. Here's, if you like Doom Patrol back in the day, or you like Fantastic Four, you can get Section Zero from Kiesel and Grumman. If you liked X-Men and you liked BPRD, but Mignola got too expansive and started doing too many spin-off books, there's the Perhaponauts by Gonzaga and Rousseau. There's ways to direct our readers to new product and still have them be in the same milieu or same genre or same context. And if that context is what they're not happy with, then you work with that reader to find something else that they will enjoy instead. But again, that's a difficult thing for a lot of people that don't want to. It's a lot of work, and a lot of creators don't feel like they have the time to do that. And that takes us back to the fans and our responsibility as fans. If the retailers don't have time to do it, instead of listening to someone bitch and moan about Gay Iceman, or about the fact that Jean Grey and Wolverine and Cyclops may have had a threesome in the new X-Men by John Hickman, and X-Men sucks now. Okay, well, if X-Men sucks now, what was it you liked about X-Men before it sucked? Well, we got over here this Silver Superhero Team book. That's all by itself. Take a look at it. See if you like that instead, type thing. And convince the readers that, it's okay to walk away from these books that you've followed for years. Because if the characters aren't what you used to enjoy anymore because they've evolved or changed because of the creative teams involved or the direction of the publisher or whatever, then that's not what you want to read anyway. And you're just buying out of road habit, and that's not the way to enjoy our hobby. Our last one is the creators. So we'll just go ahead and close that down. Too many creators in this business, whether it's the comic skaters, whether it's the people that are considered SJWs, people that are on Marvel and DC books, whether it's Mark Waid attacking your boy Zach, Richard Meyer, a lot of creators need to just back up and stick to minding your own store, minding your own careers, and not sit there and poke the bear. Again, here's Ethan saying, well, back when I was doing Green Lantern, yeah, back when you were doing Green Lantern, well, you were Green Lantern and yours and Jeff Johns' Green Lantern and the Green Lantern Corps with the Rainbow Mood Ring Brigades there. I can get it all these the hardcovers for like $2.99. Maybe maybe I'm not saying it didn't sell to some retailers when it was out originally, but ultimately, there was such overstock of your stuff that it's being liquidated for no cost because nobody wants it. And everybody that followed after you on that concept, that construct is sitting there in alleys at $2.99, $3.99 a book. Nobody wants it. And the sales in the regular books are keeping tanking. Here comes Nora K. Jemisin with a new type of Green Lantern and a new science fiction police procedural in Far Sector. And you're going, oh, that book sucks because it's written by a black woman. And you just W. That's the first black Green Lantern book I've given a damn about in 25 years. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. So, if I'm that audience, who are you to tell me I can't have that? Who do you think you are? I mean, go ahead, make your Cyberfrog book. Go sell your books to your 3,400 backers for $400,000. If those 3,000 to 4,000 people are foolish enough to pay you an obscene amount of money to give you that much money, that's their choice and their prerogative, and all the power to them and to you. But you're not showing me that you're winning the battle and proving that your stuff is better than what Marvel or DC are publishing, because Marvel and DC are still publishing 5 to 6 times what you're publishing in terms of actual units. So, talk to me when you're selling 100,000. You got 100,000 backers every time out of your Cyberfrog. Then you show me something. When you guys sit there and say, when I sit there and criticize Mark Waid for attacking Zach, the reason I criticize Mark is because I don't believe that Richard Meyer would be here in the level of presence that he has if Mark hadn't made a big stink about it in the media and gone after Antarctic Press and said, hey, don't publish this guy or else. I think if he just left it alone and Jawbreakers had gotten published through Antarctic, he might have got maybe even the same amount of people, 5,000 or 6,000 people to buy through Antarctic. But that's piddly in our market. Anything under 15,000, according to Brian Hibbs, according to several other retail specialists, that's a marginal seller that doesn't even matter to us. So why did Mark Waid have to make a big deal about it? Stuff like this, is just not healthy. Promote the creators whose work you like and leave the stuff that you don't like alone. Let other people enjoy it if they want, and that's what I try to do. And yes, I'm critical of people who don't do that, whether it's creators or fans or whomever. But at the same time, you're not enjoying it if you're complaining about it. So, if I say, hey, stop complaining and try something else, it's not because I don't want you to enjoy what you're reading. It's that from what I can tell, you're not enjoying it. And if you're not enjoying it, maybe it's time to let it go and try something else. But other than that, there's that notion, again, of alpha dog. Like I said, CG is sitting there, Zach's tearing down Clint Stoker for no reason. Who's in the pecking order? Like I said, the guy who was part of CG that left, who does Bigfoot Bill and creator of Earthworm Jim. I can't think of his name. I apologize. He left the group and everybody's been talking about, well, he's a homophobe because he's a Christian and this is that. And, oh, Jesus. Maybe the guy left for other reasons. I don't know. And I don't care because, ultimately I'm not buying either one of those books. But if you're going to sit there and attack this guy, attack that guy, all you're trying to do is tear down other people to build your own self up. And if that's what you got to do to build your brand or build your books up, then is your book really, are you worth supporting? Is your book really worth supporting if that's what you got to do to earn it? I question that, and I hope that in the future, more creators think about that and try not to tear down one another. Um, and I think creators should take time out and say, hey, um, I've got what I've got. Do I need more? And yes, right now it's very hard to say, hey, I don't need more because of the situation. You try and get as much work as you can coming in because of the coronavirus and people aren't working and people aren't getting paid. I get that. But, in an, shall we say, an ideal situation where everybody's getting paid and their books are selling to whatever degree they are, I don't think people need to be at 8 different publishers at the same time. I don't think that you need to be in comics and film and television and video games at the same time. If you do, then I'd like to know why. Is it because somewhere along the line you're not selling enough in these other products? And if that's the case, then what's the problem? Is we're not marketing that book well enough or that product well enough for you? Is it because the product isn't that good? What is the causation of this? Because we shouldn't have to flood the market with our presence in order to eke out a living. All of us should be able to do like maybe 1 to 2 books a month and not have to worry about doing other jobs. That would be ideal for everybody, I think. Well, I got more ideas. Yes, so do other people. Share the wealth. And that doesn't mean you can't go over and market in books or television or video games or whatever. You can. And if you can get it, okay, great. But if you get it and people criticize you for it, understand that they're criticizing you because they feel like you're depriving other people of opportunities or depriving them of an opportunity to discover other people. Not, and they think you're being selfish. Mm-hmm. And to some degree, you are. Acknowledge that. Yeah, I am being selfish. And if you don't like it, I understand that and I accept that, but I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. But, you don't have to buy it. I respect your choice of not buying it, but you don't need to attack me about it. I get it, and move on. But, neither here nor there, I guess, so to speak. But, people are always asking me, why don't, you're jealous because, why are you so jealous of so-and-so's? Bunn, Wade, Bendis, whomever. I'm not. I don't really care. I don't buy their books. I just want to see other writers. I know who I want to see, and I'm not seeing them. And part of it is because they're flooding the market. And I look at them and go, really? That's what it is for me. So anyway, as far as distributors, because I didn't put distributors on the list, everybody thinks it's just Diamond. In a way, Lulu.com and IndiePlanet.com, Barry Gregory, with his Kablam printing, a lot of other people who do print on demand, they're sort of distributors too. And, we need to find a way to get enough content marketed and properly structured so that it can be both on all platforms, whether it's brick and mortar stores, whether it's digital, whether it's print on demand, from publisher to reader, whatever. We should be able to try and be inclusive of all those things. And instead of trying to fracture it the way it has become. And but we can't do that without retailers embracing it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. So that is our discussion of the blame game. And like I said, I'm part of it too a little bit. I'm critical. I try to be fair and honest about things, but I'm not going to say I don't tear down people at times. I try to do it not because I don't like you or not because I don't think you belong here. There is absolutely nobody in this business who I want to see gone just for the sake of because I don't like them. If I want you gone, it's because you don't seem to have respect for anybody else. And I notice I said seem to. A lot of people, if I sat down with them in a room one-on-one and had a conversation with them, I bet they'd understand my perspective. They'd tell me their perspectives. And even if we didn't agree with one another, we'd see eye to eye on things. And maybe it would change their perspectives, and maybe they'd change things differently. Or maybe I'd say, well, I see where you're coming from. Maybe I'd support something in theirs. But because we don't communicate, you get this wall of consternation, wall of hatred, whatever you want to call it. So, it is what it is. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our reviews for the week. And I didn't do that many reviews this week because of things going on. And, of course, we didn't get that many books. I didn't get my books from last week that I was supposed to, that never arrived from Diamond. I don't know if it was just never shipped. They're trying to find it. It's been processed, but I think it just wasn't shipped yet. And that's why my retailer didn't get it yet. So hopefully I'll get those trades that I was supposed to get last weekend soon. But we'll go ahead and share our stuff here. And we'll start with Amethyst #2 from DC Comics, $3.99. The writer and artist is Amy Reeder. The editor is Andy Corey. The genre is superhero fantasy. It was released on March 26, 2020. What it's about is Amethyst goes to the other houses of Gemworld and basically finds out that her realm is considered the joke, and they have no interest in aiding her in her quest against Lord Opal. She has to flee the House of Sapphire, manages to get shelter on a boat headed to the land of Aquamarine. On the boat, she and her two friends decide to try some of the hokey earth gemstone magic that her parents had given her, and she learns that she can actually spirit travel through amethyst stones. Through this, she learns that Lord Opal has captured her entire kingdom and encased them in amethyst, including her long-thought dead parents. Recommended for ages 13 and up, 3.5 stars. It's just a little bit above average book for what DC's been putting out in recent times. Amy's not my most favorite artist at all, but there's nothing. I could sit here and I could criticize her artwork, but yeah, again, why would I do that? It's not beneficial to anybody for me to just say, "Well, this art sucks," or this. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's different, and it's okay. There's nothing that's just so horribly wrong with it that I feel an urge to junk it. So we'll take a look at it real quick. This is where she's actually learning that she can go into the gemstones and go through and look around and see things. And as you can see, the artwork is not that bad. Some of the layouts are a little bit odd. Some of the anatomies, I don't know. It's not bad. It's just, it's her style, Not necessarily my thing, but, I don't mind it. And since it's only going to be like a 6-issue miniseries, I'm more or less following along, just trying to see what the story is going to be. And so far, it's, for a second issue, we're still kind of going through introductory phase of things. So I kind of wish the book was a little bit better paced than it is, but that's kind of true for most comics these days. So I can't really fault her for that. So like I said, an average to a little bit above average book. Our next book is Judge Dredd, False Witness #1, $3.99 from IDW Publishing, written by Brandon Easton. Artist is Kei Zama. The colorist is Ava De La Cruz. The letterer is Sean Lee. Genre science fiction. Also released March 26 of 2020. And what it's about is a courier who is handling contraband, is trying to get through the Antonin Scalia block of Mega City 1 during a riot when Judge Dredd and some judge bots come in to do crowd control, and he has to escape them. He does, and he finds out that what he was told he was delivering isn't at all what it actually is. He learns that he has been played to be part of a major illegal experiment, and now that he is an accessory, if he tries to turn the client in, he will be found guilty as well by the judges. And the baddest one of them all is on his tail. Recommended for ages 16 up, another 3.5 stars. It's a decent introductory episode or issue. The courier happens to be a guy who knows the judges pretty well. He trained to be a judge, but washed out or decided that it wasn't for him and left. I don't remember which, but he knows what they think about and how they operate. And he's that's why he could escape, because he knew how to basically work off the judge bots and get away from Dredd. But now, it's interesting. I don't want to get into the experiments and what's going on because that would spoil it too much. But the pace is okay. Brandon's doing a good job on trying to get this done. I think it's only going to be a 4-issue miniseries, so it has to be fairly quick paced and get into it. And Kei Zama does a good job on the art. It's a little bit, I won't say rough. Stylistically, it's kind of like that gritty Simon Bisley look to it, but it's also got the Korean and anime influence thrown in there a little bit, and I'll show you what I mean real quick again. You can kind of see it there in the cover. That is by Kei Zama. You can see a little bit of that structure that Simon Bisley and Liam Sharp use a lot, but you can also see the structure layout of the layout is very kinetically similar to a lot of manga. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. And there's his 2 pages, and this is where the judge bot wants to see the contraband and see what's in his backpack. Of course, he's not going to show him that because it's contraband and it's illegal. And he says, "What if I say no?" Well, that would be against your better judgment. And of course, he's now evading them and getting away. It's well done. The colors are sharp. Let me go ahead and change something here real quick. There we go. But yeah, for a first issue, it's okay. Brandon is kind of an up and coming writer. Recent few years, he's been getting quite a bit of work in the comic scene over at IDW, a little bit elsewhere as well. I don't always buy his stuff because he tends to get a lot of character properties I'm not that interested in. But I thought when he got this one, I thought I'd give it a shot. I'm not a huge Judge Dredd fan, but usually Dredd, when it's written right, you don't need to be a follower of the character in constantly. You can read a story or a single story arc and get the whole thing and not necessarily have to worry about getting more. So I think that there's a good probability that when you get this series, if you buy all 4 issues or 6 issues, however many issues it's going to be, you're going to get a pretty decent self-contained thing without any further commitment to the character. So, I can give this a fairly decent recommendation. Our next book is Far Sector number 5. Publisher DC Comics, $3.99. Nora K. Jemison's writer. Artist is Jamal Campbell. Letterer is Deron Bennett. Genre is science fiction superhero. released March 26, 2020. In the aftermath of the protest shootings from last issue, Green Lantern Jo Malene thinks about her history and reflects upon the reason she chose to become a member of the Green Lantern Corps in the first place. Plus, a new clue enters the investigation. Ages 17 and up, 3 out of 5 stars. Now, for those who've watched the show on a regular basis, you know I've given earlier issues of Far Sector a little bit higher score. The reason why is because this is almost kind of like a whole issue of background filler of Joe's history, and really isn't moving the story forward, in my opinion. It's good information to have. I like the characterization. I like learning about the character and how she met the Green Lantern representative that gave her the ring, and how she chose and why she chose to come to this Dyson Sphere planet and become the Green Lantern of the sector and everything. It's very interesting stuff. But at the same time, it's not a distraction from what was laid out in the first 4 issues, but it's kind of like it's like going on a quest and you do a side quest. And it's like, okay, I get what you're doing, but let's get back to what the story is kind of about. I kind of wish, I guess you could say, that some of this that was all put in 1 issue had been chopped up, and we saw glimpses of it in earlier issues, in segments instead, I think, maybe. But it's not a bad issue. It's an average issue. 3 out of 5 is an average comic book. I had been giving it 4 and 4.5 stars, but so it's a little bit of a downer this episode. But not every issue of a series or every issue, every time out is going to be excellent. So I'm not knocking Nora or anything like that. I'm sure that it'll get back on track, so to speak, as it were. So if you're, the only thing I could say that might be negative is because it does talk about kind of stereotypical tropes that go on with police corruption and mistreatment of Black community stuff. I'm sure that the anti-SJW people out there will say something about it. And because of the way it's presented, instead of being chopped up the way I think it would have been better, I'm not going to say they have a point, but I can understand why they might complain. But chances are, if you're one of those type of fans, you're not reading this series anyway. So hopefully we won't hear anything about it too much. Our next book. Oh, actually, let's take a look real quick at Jamal Campbell's artwork. This is where she is just got fired from her job, and she's in a club getting drunk about it, and that's where she meets her Green Lantern mentor. And I think the Green Lantern mentor character is just really kind of funky looking, but really interesting type thing. But it's kind of cool though. And I think Jamal, as usual, is really hitting. Jamal is really shining in this book as the artist, and I hope that after this series, whether he works with Nora some more or works with other writers, I hope that audiences don't overlook him on this book, because he's really a sharp artist. Our next book is Heart Attack, number 5, Image Comics, $3.99. It is the 5th of 6 issues. Publisher's Image Comics. Writer is Sean Kittleson. Artist is Eric Zawadzki. The colorist is Mike Spicer, and the letterer is Pat Brousseau. The genre is SF, science fiction, superhero. Released March 26th of this year. What it's about. And for those of you who know, I have not exactly been a fan of this series, but to do the rock. Finally, in this penultimate issue, as the story reaches the climactic sequence of events, it might go in an interesting direction as different factions of power players in the city are about to try to use the kids with powers to their own means. And Jill and Charlie, our couple lead characters, are caught in the middle, as are Jill's other friends. And things are about to get their most violent. Recommended for 16 and up. And I give it 2.5 stars. It's a little bit, again, I'm not really been a fan of this book all that much as I've bought it. I've said in the past it has just too many elements of other things that are just blatantly obvious that they were inspired by or were just lifting from. And again, that's what this is doing. I just, I'm kind of like, I hope that the final issue gives it some decent closure for what it is. I don't know. I don't want to trash anybody. They're trying. I can see why Image picked it up. The art by Zawadzki, while it's not my favorite, it stands on its own. It's got decent stylism. It's different. It does stand out, I think, on a shelf if it's placed properly in a store. I think the key problem is that it's just got a little bit too much similarity to other things that are pretty straightforwardly obvious to anybody who has a knowledge of comics history and stuff. So, that's why I kind of gave it a little bit less than average review. Here's the artwork. They're at a church in this scene. The church people are going to do a march against a divisionary wall in the middle of the city type thing, kind of like the wall in Berlin, only it's a wall to keep superpowered people away from the non-powered people and other stuff like that. And, not to give too much away, but the blonde in the bottom left there, she's one of the lead character, two leads friends, and she lets people know that this protest, this charge against the wall is going to happen, and there's going to be a massacre, basically. And it doesn't show the massacre, but they're leading up to it. And that's going to be the final issue. And it's a question of now, are the kids with the powers going to do something to stop this, stop the government from massacring these other people, or is it what's going to happen type thing? Are they going to get caught as victims? We'll see what happens. But it's all about very similar tropes that we've seen in other books with the corruption of government and the corruption of those who have money and power, and how these kids get manipulated. It's the same thing that you saw in Fox's The Gifted with the Fenris twins. That's what Charlie and the other characters, Charlie and Jill is the Fenris twins, basically. So it is what it is. So, we'll just kind of let it go from there, and one more issue to go, and hopefully they'll wow us in the next final issue. Our next book is The Martian Monster and Other Stories. It's a hardcover edition of about 300 pages for $29.99. The publisher is Fantagraphic Books. The writers include William Gaines, Al Feldstein, and Gardner Fox, and the artist is Jack Kamen. The genre is science fiction and horror. It was released in 2019. This is a collection of 22 comic stories with additional articles and essays about the work of artist Jack Kamen during the 1950s and 1960s for EC Comics. Written by some of the golden age of comics' best writers, lushly illustrated throughout by an artist who is largely unsung by the industry today. recommended for ages 14 up. I give it a 5-star rating. And I'm not going to be able to do a quick look on this stuff, but I do have the actual book right here. As you can see, it's a nice thick book. Good hardcover. And when I say lavishly illustrated, look at the way the line weights are on those inks. It's a little bit blurry on the camera, and I apologize for that. But the brushwork on this stuff is just absolutely gorgeous. And if I didn't know better, I would say that artists like Frank Cho and Mark Schultz and I'm trying to think of his name. But anyway, just Cho and Schultz were probably influenced by this guy in some respects. I'll give you another good example. Look at the weight of the line art and the way he uses blacks for create depth and shadow. Let me see if he's got a good, and story-wise, they're all short story science fiction stuff. That's just, really fun to read. I'll give you an example. The Eternal Man's about a scientist who builds a body for himself that's a robot. He puts his mind inside the robotic body. I Died Tomorrow. He's telling you a story about going back in time where he got killed and watched himself get killed, and how do I stop it? Little interesting stories like that are fun to read. You probably can't see the nuance of detail on the girl's dress there in that panel, or the girl behind the two women, the blonde or the brunette in the background. Because the camera's just not capturing it, unfortunately. But there's just this absolutely gorgeous pattern on a dress, and it's these days they would just do a computer, or throw a little computer pattern on it, or do dot matrix or something. This is like carefully, painstakingly crafted design, squiggles in the work, and it's perfect. Just absolutely gorgeous artwork by Jack. I never heard of him before this, and I'm someone who likes the classics and stuff, and I just wasn't familiar. I never really got into the EC era of books, but something had grabbed my attention on this when I was going through the previews catalog and Fantagraphics, and I said, I'll try this because it just looked interesting, and I was looking for, some good science fiction stories, and I got them, and I can't complain about this at all. Very good investment of my money. I got this you might remember I got this last December as part of my Christmas swag. I just hadn't got a chance to get around to reading them until recently. But the other book by Jack is 0 Hour, and it's basically the same thing as The Martian Monster and Other Stories. Another collection of 22 stories. The writers include Jack Olick and Ray Bradbury in this particular book, and this one was released in 2014. But it's another collection of 22 different stories from the 50s and 60s under EC Comics. And again, I give it another 5-star rating. They do some good articles about Jack's history as well, and before and afterwards of the stories. Again, just really nice, lavishly illustrated, beautiful inking, great use of blacks. I really wish that the artists today would study stuff like this. And you don't have to emulate this style, but you can learn from this stuff. And by learning from how to learning from this stuff can make a lot of the stuff that looks so simplistically similar to one another actually have more depth and make stuff more unique to themselves. It would fix a lot of the problems I think there is in the styles that just make me bored. I guess you could say, because technically sound artists, they're all the modern guys, but they just don't have anything that makes them stand out. So I really wish that more people would learn to examine and appreciate this era of comics and learn how to apply it to the modern styles, because I think it can be done. But they can't do it if you don't look at it and learn from it. And here's another one. I really wish this camera would focus a little bit better, but can you see the line weight? And way he does different depth perception, shadows. So yeah, this one was actually $28.99 instead of $29.99. I don't know why it was $1 cheaper, but hey, who's complaining, right? But yeah, those are from Fantagraphics books. Sorry, I didn't get the ISBN numbers for you. Maybe if someone asks me for them with the email or a message or something, I'll mention those next week. But cannot recommend those highly enough. Our next review is actually films. And, I've been watching a couple of the DVDs I'd gotten back in Christmas time and just hadn't gotten around to. First one is Spider-Man Far From Home, starring Tom Holland, Jake Gyllenhaal, Samuel L. Jackson, Zendaya, Marissa Tomei, and others. The genre is superhero, released in 2019. What it's about: after the death of Tony Stark in Avengers Endgame, Peter Parker is trying to cope with the loss of his mentor. His school decides to send him and some other students on a field trip to Europe, and it seems like the perfect way to escape from the responsibility of being Spider-Man for a time and just enjoy himself. Only somehow a new threat arises, and he is caught up in an adventure with Nick Fury and a new hero, Quentin Beck, a.k.a. Mysterio. Only is Beck what he claims to be, and can Peter ever find a way to tell MJ that he likes her? Recommended for ages 12 and up, and it's a rating of 3 stars. It's just the middle of the road Marvel movie. It's better, in my opinion, than Homecoming was. In some respects, in terms of I guess I just like Mysterio better as a villain than I did the way they did the Vulture. I guess is the best way to put it. I didn't really care for the Vulture. I really didn't care for Michael Keaton being the Vulture, I hate to say. But I mean, not that Michael Keaton's a bad actor, but he's been in enough different superhero movies that they could have cast somebody else. I think would have been better. But either way, yeah, it was just there. Um, it's mind fluff, and what I mean by that is turn your brain off, or you're going to be like me, going, "This story doesn't make any sense." But I will give them the producers and writers of the story a benefit of the doubt on that, because they acknowledge the story doesn't make sense and actually wink at the audience several times by the with the cast members saying lines that, "Hey, how is this happening? This wouldn't happen. What's going on?" type thing. They know that the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I do wish they'd written a better script plot for it, but you get what you get, I guess. So, like I said, middle of the road Marvel movie. Next one was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, starring Shamik Moore, Jake Johnston, Haley Steinfeld, Mahershala Ali, Brian Tyree Henry, Lily Tomlin, Lee Schreiber, Catherine Hahn rather, and Nicolas Cage. Genre's superhero. It was released in December of 2018, apparently. What it's about? This film actually won an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think it deserved it compared to some of the other animated features, but as with everything, a lot of times the brand gets you more than what you deserve. Anyway, what it's about. Miles Morales becomes his universe's Spider-Man and meets with multiple other Spider-Persons from other dimensions when the Kingpin uses a special super collider under New York City to create a universal gateway to try to get a version of his dead wife and son who had fled from him after they saw him in a fight with the Peter Parker Spider-Man and died in a car accident. Yeah. Recommended for 12 and up. Again, 3 out of 5 stars. Another middle of the road book. It's okay. For me, I'm really not a fan of the Spider characters anymore. I never got into Miles. I'm not against Miles. I've never been into Spider Gwen. I never liked Peter Porker Spider Ham. I got no idea who Spider Man Noir or the anime girl with the robot spider character really is. The only character I really cared about was the Peter Parker that was living there who had lost his wife. And they had split up because he didn't know when to walk away from being a superhero and she left him. That was a well written part of the storyline. And that's the only thing about the movie that really was a driving force for me throughout the story. But that being said, I don't think Miles's story was bad. I just think that some of the idea of having a super collider under New York City and nobody knowing about it. And there's a part in the movie where they go to Aunt May, who's played by Lily Tomlin, out in Queens. There's a shed in the backyard, and that leads to the spider bat cave, underneath the shed. And it's like who's not going to know in that area? It's like, I keep waiting. I know Men in Black is connected to Disney and everything now. I keep waiting to say yeah, the Men in Black showed up and bleep 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 bleep. We could forget that they built the damn thing because there's so much stuff underneath the ground. There's no way that nobody would know that he wasn't there with his spider buggy and his spider cycle and all this other stuff. But it's just again, mind fluff. Turn your brain off. It's fun enough, I guess, but like I said, middle of the road. It's okay. um, I know a lot of people loved it, but whether I'm just too old school or I just don't feel a connection to the characters that much in the movie. I wish it were otherwise, but 3 stars isn't bad. Like I said, it's an average. I would not have given it the best film for animation. I think there's probably better ones that were nominated, but Oh well. Our last review for the night is Superman Red Sun, starring Jason Isaacs, Amy Acker, Diedrich Bader, Roger Craig Smith, Vanessa Marshall, Paul Williams, and others. The genre's alternate reality superhero, released earlier this month. What it's about in this adaptation of the Elseworlds graphic novel by Mark Millar, Dave Johnson, and Killian Plunkett, the alien known as Superman crash landed on Earth in the Soviet Union and is turned into the Soviets' premier hero, serving the socialist communist agenda. He takes over Russia himself and kills Stalin when he learns of Stalin's actions against the Russian people. He thinks he's trying to do the right thing for all of humanity, but he is being tricked. Is it by Lex Luthor or is it by Brainiac? Recommended for ages 12 and up, and again, another 3-star rating. It's a good enough movie for what it is. I don't think anybody, it's pretty straightforward for what it is. I think the book was better than the film, but that's not necessarily a surprise. But the film was a decent representation of what the story is. I wouldn't not recommend it. The main reason I just give it 3 out of 5 instead of a 4 or instead of a 4 is basically because I guess maybe because I already knew the story from the book, or maybe because I don't know. I think if you gave it a 4, I wouldn't complain. If another person had given it a 4 out of a 5 rating, I wouldn't argue with them. Maybe I'm just being a little bit harsh on it. I don't know, but I think possibly because there's just so many of these things that are from DC animated that are just adaptations of books that have already been done, that it just feels a little bit lesser than it could be. I'd like to see some more original movies from the DC animated side, I guess, would be my criticism there more so. And that's not necessarily criticism against this movie so much as about the approach that Warner Brothers and DC are taking there. So, anywho, that is our reviews for this evening. Next week, I don't know for sure what I'll be able to review. I know there's stuff I haven't read in my collection, so I'll probably be addressing that. Might do pull some stuff out of the back stock, review that, depending on what else is coming in. Depends on whether or not my retailer ever gets the books that I ordered that didn't show up last week. That is really a shame. But okay, we're past our 2-hour time. We're pretty much in the time zone. Usually finish up on the show. So if you don't mind here real quick, I'm trying to get my tab open. There we go. As always, I'm going to do a quick notice on the COPPA. Everything that was in this episode was intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content is kid-friendly sometimes, we're here to talk to the adults and inform them of information and help them research our stuff as consumers in service of our youth. And I did have a little bit of adult language, as I usually do on the show. Rated TV 16 and up. If you want to reach me between episodes, on Facebook, you reach me at lewis.brightraven, at DeviantArt at deviantart.com/brightraven. Here at YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven. At Gmail, which is my preferred email for questions or comments is quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. And if that fails, you can always try lewisbrightраven@yahoo.com. The Quoth the Raven podcast is usually on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, although sometimes I do other special editions when necessary. And I hope to get some live draws and some other stuff going on very soon. In the wake of the recent events, I should probably be doing that anyway. Or, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. You'll have to tell me. But anyway, why did I have that shirt out there? Well, I was going to say some things about when we were talking about the toxicity and then issues of different things, but I decided not to. So I just did that now about myself because, again, I got a little bit. I try to have a little bit of sense of humor and humility on the show, like if I can. So anyway, I'll see you guys next week. And until then, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time.